Interesting. Sputnik? Is that you? No, it would be. I'll bring him back. What, are you just gonna leave his creepy, gnarly looking ass over there in the SC pound? Get in here, buddy. Come on. You're fine. They'll get over it. I still love you, Valentine Rabbit. You'll be fine. Gourmet chocolate covered grasshoppers in the foundation today. Well, not gonna let me have it. Alright, well. Anyways. Ooh, got a message. I get some. I have no clue who the hell any of these people are. None. Not a one. Thank you for subscribing.
By the children, but then one day the sun peeked through the treetops, and all of the flowers around them bloomed at the same time. It then began raining for days, weeks, and months.
Sorry about that intermission.
By the time they found Noah, his body was a smoking husk covered in arcane symbols. It continued to rain, and the valley started to fill up. He recalls seeing one of the children die for the first time, as one of them slipped down into a hole that was filling with water, and rather than trying to climb out, it stood there as the waters rised, and the others stood around and watched. Near the end, as the forest themselves started to flood, the children from all over the forest began rounding up all of their captives, which Methuselah guesses to be in the millions, and dragged them deeper into the woods where their god was.
You can see why I did it out there for that.
Methuselah and some others managed to slip away during this time, along with some fairies who still had their wits about them. They ran for some mountains to the south, and once they got above the tree line, they could see that the forest stretched into the horizon. They also saw their god, a monstrous, festering tree with red lights around its base and people hanging from its branches. The fairies that looked at it began weeping and fled back into the forest, and he says that you could hear it screaming and moaning as well. They kept on running, and they lived on the mountain for 100 years while the world was underwater. When the waters receded, the children of the night were gone. The fairies had gone back to the old forest, and the rest of them went on with their lives. Methuselah tells Clef that it has long been his hope and belief that all of the children of the night drowned during the flood. But if Clef has any reason to believe that that isn't the case, he needs to know, so that he can go away from this place. He says that he can't do it again. He can't go back into the dark.
Bust up eschatology with
Clef says that they don't have any reason to believe that the children are still around, which is, of course, a lie, and Methuselah can tell that he's lying. He tells Clef to not seek them out, and to flee if he ever encounters them. Their civilization relies on our terror, and they must remain buried. For those familiar with the SCP-1000 file, this paints a pretty different picture of the Bigfoot, especially their downfall. Rather than being wiped out by humanity with advanced tech, they were wiped out by a great flood sent by a sorcerer named Noah. The Bigfoot themselves were also not technologically inclined whatsoever, instead being monstrous aberrations that feed on our terror and communicate through our nightmares. Their entire forest and their god, Titania, sunk into the earth after the flood. So the question remains on what exactly remains down in that forest. With no further ado then, let's take a look at the exploration log of the team heading into the forest. All members of the team, both the Applied Task Force and the researchers, are equipped with Class C polyshell positively pressured insertion suits with filtered respirators. The team enters the pitch-black forest, and they begin discussing what they might find down here, since so much has been pulled down by either the tree itself or the wormwood plants. One of the researchers on the team was also on the wormwood team, and says that the ancient Davites learned about the Children of the Night, and how Titania could pull civilizations into the ground. They came across the sea to this forest, and after the sacrifice of 100,000 Deva, they managed to grab some seeds.
Beautiful presentation.
The seeds themselves only originally pulled things into the ground, but they enchanted them with some sorcery to also make people forget the things ever existed.
It's just a wild damn planet.
One of the team asks why the Children of the Night were so intent on dragging stuff down here, and a researcher says that if the children were created to kill the first man, maybe they didn't know how to do anything else. The team continues through the forest for a few hours before coming across a tree in a small clearing, with a small, emaciated humanoid figure impaled on one of its branches. It has long, pointed ear tips, large eye sockets, and silver hair, and in a pouch on its back, it was carrying a small bundle of sticks and leaves in the shape of a doll. The team continues on, but the control members observing them have lost the team's location due to some technical issues. They set up camp while waiting to see if the issues get sorted out. They wait several hours before setting up shifts and falling asleep. They're woken suddenly by one of the doctors screaming, before calming down and explaining that he had an extremely vivid dream. In the dream, he was walking down a path into the woods, and he saw the fairy they passed on the tree, as well as another in a ditch near it.
But I know him.
The forest was lit up like daytime, but everything was a horrible red color, and he continued walking until coming to a hole where he heard someone's voice saying, "The devil is 20 miles down, but what's deeper?"
But
he looked over the edge of the hole, and then he was suddenly falling before he woke up.
I'm changing my numbers around.
Control is briefed about the dream, and they inform the team that these psychological issues will become more prevalent the closer they get to the center of the forest. The team packs up and continues further into the forest for another couple hours before coming across a large tree with a spiral staircase emerging from the trunk and winding upwards. Above them, they see a number of strange, twisting structures formed from the wood and limbs of the trees in the shapes of the ruined buildings outside of the forest. The team then becomes aware of a sound in the distance, akin to wind, and they move through the increasingly dense forest to try and track it down.
As soon as you have it,
they lose contact with Control as they enter into a clearing domed by large trees pulled in towards each other. Hanging from these trees are thousands of humanoid corpses, some humans, some fairies, all of which are shackled by thick black chains. The clearing slopes downward, and at the bottom is a large, featureless stone slab. The doctor who had the dream recognizes the clearing, but says that there was a hole here instead of that slab. They suspect that the ruins they're looking for are underneath this slab, and they wonder at first how to get under it, since it likely weighs thousands of tons, but they then spot a broken corner of it with an opening. The opening extends downwards for a short bit before landing on stone, so the team sets up a ladder and splits up, with half of the team remaining above ground. The sound of moving air is clearly coming from down below, and they enter into a square chamber with wooden boxes bound in chains to the walls. There's also a single door that leads into a long hallway containing more wooden boxes, as well as various humanoid and animal bones. They also spot a large mural carved into the rock, depicting many hundreds of dark figures standing beneath a large tree with a red artifact in its center. They continue through, passing sealed passageways overgrown with roots, as well as more murals depicting various scenes of humanoid figures being bound in chains, dropped into pits full of bodies, or set on fire. The same tree and red artifact is present in nearly every mural.
I'd love to hear the script.
They eventually come to a large stone door with another mural on it, depicting a mass of dark figures with yellow eyes huddled around the base of a large, curled, vaguely feminine figure, with many arms wrapped around them, as dark clouds gather overhead. They open the door and enter into a circular room containing 2 staircases, one ascending and one descending. The one ascending has been blocked off completely by rubble, so they head down further, where they enter into an enormous chamber stretching as far as the eye can see in every direction, with a low ceiling. In a circle around the entrance, and then in concentric circles around that, are large, unmoving humanoid figures, covered entirely in hair, curled in the fetal position. They are each covered in the toxic fog from the tree, and they are all breathing slowly and in unison.
Skeleton. The whole list of rules you gotta follow.
We make USAA insurance for renters who make the most of their space and money. That's why we make it easy to cover the stuff you love for as little as 33 cents a day. USAA, what you're made of, we're made for.
Back in the clearing, the rest of the team hears movement in the nearby trees before hearing a sound akin to a child's laughter, but stretched unnaturally and echoing as if from very far away. They then hear it again, but from behind them, and then they spot a large object moving quickly through the trees before the laughter suddenly stops. It's replaced by a long, high-pitched whine coming from somewhere above them that lasts for 15 seconds. The ground beneath them starts shaking. The arched trees overhead begin to rustle, and then the trees pull back from one another, opening up the dome. They re-establish communications with Control, who tells them that there is another entity at their position that they can't identify. The high-pitched whining sound cuts off the conversation. The cavern shakes again, and then the entire cavern is bathed in a vibrant red light, emanating from the base of SCP-6666. Meanwhile, underneath the clearing, the team recovers from the ground shaking before noticing that the sound of moving air has now stopped. They then see that all of the hunched figures around them are now staring at the doorway with glowing yellow eyes.
I don't think that matters anymore.
There's a loud snapping sound as one of the figures begins moving its arms and starts to stand, and then all of the other figures begin moving as well. The team immediately flees back up the stairwell and makes it to the ladder. As they're climbing, a powerful gust of air comes rushing from behind them, blowing a large amount of toxic fog with it, and one of the doctors gets blown off the ladder and out onto the clearing, cracking his faceplate. Within seconds, his body seizes and then goes limp, and the rest of the team leaves him behind as they continue to run. Chattering laughter can be heard all around them as they sprint through the forest back the way they came, and 2 of the team members open up their flamethrowers on the nearby trees. One of the team gets pulled backwards suddenly into the darkness, and his screams are suddenly cut off, followed by a wet, tearing sound.
I told you don't do my physics.
A dark mass is then seen flying towards the rest of the team, which turns out to be the upper torso of the team member, as if he was ripped in half. One of the team shoots him to put him out of his misery before continuing on.
Jordan said, yep.
The rest of the team eventually does make it out without losing anyone else. As it turned out, the doctor whose faceplate cracked started transmitting audio and video an hour after the rest got out. He's heard coughing violently before rolling onto his back, and he sees Titania glowing with a bright red light above him. His suit managed to repressurize, and the effects of the fog wore off due to being so brief. So he stands up. He hears the same stretched sound of laughter as he steps out of the clearing into the forest, so he decides to turn back.
Supreme Court.
As he turns, his audio and video equipment begin to act erratically, but it picks up several distorted frames of a tall figure standing in a gap between two trees, illuminated by the red light of 6666. The camera then shuts off entirely, and we're left with just his audio as he quickly walks through the forest. A laugh is heard from immediately behind him, and 6666 lets out a powerful, low, droning sound multiple times before his audio shuts off as well. Truth be told, the Foundation has had far worse exploration attempts than that, since most of the team survived, although they didn't really accomplish their objective. While they were in there, the root growth of 6666 above ground began to rapidly expand, and the tree itself began emitting red light from seams in its trunk. Spherical, glowing sacs also began appearing across its entire limb system. Meanwhile, Hector began pulling against his bindings, eventually snapping the cables in half, at which point he began vocalizing. Audio recordings of the event show Hector speaking in an unknown tongue, but those in the cavern at the time report hearing him speak in their native tongue. Luckily, someone made the good choice of transcribing Hector's words for us, which read,
"Hear me, hear me. I am Hector, son of Holos, the screaming lance of the northern sky, last son of old Europe, servant eternally to the Sky King Saurus von Apollyon, Lord Dominion of the world of men, inheritor of Asem's iron crown. Hear me, dread Titania. Hear me now and tremble. Tremble now as you did all those many years ago when I crossed the rising sea to find you. Tremble now as you did when I drove my lance into your bleeding chest, and tremble now as you did when I learned you had already betrayed your purpose. I struck you down, demon of yore. I wrenched open your body and broke you. You have betrayed your masters, dread Titania, but you will not betray me. I will have your obedience. You will honor my wish and pour your poison into this grave. You will smother the corpse city of your interlopers and bury them. You will do this, demon, because I have demanded it of you. I am Hector, the divine fire of my lord's perfect will. Answer to me now, dread Titania. Hear me, and tremble."
Immediately after speaking, Hector began furiously attacking the seal on the tree's opening, as well as the tree itself. He eventually managed to pull out 3 of his remaining arms and use them to widen the opening in the tree with a great cracking sound. This caused a thick, dense cloud of the toxic fog to continue spewing out of the tree and into the cavern, at which point the red lights from the tree dimmed and faded away. Hector continued to attack the tree for an additional 6 hours before finally stopping. What happened is that Hector originally made it to the tree and to the home of the remaining children of the night. He tore a hole in the side of the tree, which caused it to start leaking out this poison all over the children. Unlike humans, this fog didn't kill the children, but it does keep them perpetually in place. So when the Foundation came along and plugged up the hole, it didn't take long for the children to shrug off the effects. Fortunately, Hector was still there and managed to fix the Foundation's foolish mistake, recontaining the children and Titania.
Scales of
this is why the whole thing is listed as Thaumiel, as the Foundation is now dependent on Titania's poison in order to keep the horrific children of the night from re-emerging into the world.
it works. Little bread tie metal
The
wire.
last
but
thing we're given is a classified
white
file
hot
written
to
by
the system under times
05-1,
to this
which
flame
addresses the
system
differences between the information
of
gathered
M2
here
different
and the information
blue can
contained in the
propane, yellow
SCP-1000
can
file.
propane. Fuck it. Spray
Obviously,
paint on the outside
we as
make it different.
readers generally take differences like this to be in the nature of the flexible canon of the SCP universe, but this one